Hi everyone, it's Jeanette with Vivo Vintage Designs. Today I wanted to try and do a quick video on how I painted this pear. Everyone's been asking me for tutorials on how I painted the birds. However, they take me hours to do, and I suppose I could do a half-hour video at a time. But the hummingbird that I did, that one took me a good 10 hours to do on and off. And the cockatiel took me about 5 hours to do because I just started doing them. So I'm really not that fast. But as I get better, I will make sure to post videos for you. All right, so to do the pear, the first thing I did was, let me just tell you what I'm using first of all. This is Kirkland photo paper. I have a variety of small brushes that I'm going to use, and my advice would be not to buy expensive brushes because the alcohol does ruin them. So if you buy, I'm not saying buy the cheap brushes, but something in between, they'll last you for a little bit and then you don't mind so bad when it's time to get rid of them. And I'm using my dry palette, and I mentioned this before. You put the inks in these little wells and you allow it to dry, and you can use this with a brush, and it gives you amazing control that I had no idea about, even though I've had this palette for a while. But what I did wrong was that I didn't list the colors that I put in each well, so I have no idea what's where. So I'm going to buy another one, and I'm going to make sure that I do label it so I can refill them. So, all right, I have a piece of paper here, the Kirkland photo paper, and I'm going to draw the basic shape of a pear with a pencil very lightly. I also had I went on Google and I found an image of a pear, and that's how I painted it. Okay, so you probably can't see this. It's very light, the image that the outline that I drew, but I want to keep it light because I don't want it to be seen underneath the inks when I'm finished with it. So the first thing that I did was I laid down the basic colors in the areas. So I'm going to start with the lighter colors and work toward my darker colors. So I'm dipping my brush into the alcohol, and then I'm dabbing it to get off most of the liquid. I want it kind of dry, and then I'm going to start adding my color. So it's almost like a dry brush technique, and I'm just blocking my colors. Make sure that you don't forget to blot the alcohol before you put it to the paper with the inks, because you can get a terrible mess. It'll start ballooning. And to blend these colors, I just dip the brush in the alcohol and then run it through like you see me doing here. It softens them and blends them. Now, I've worked with watercolors in the past, and I was not that good at it. But I guess you might say that this kind of works the same. And I wish I could tell you what colors I'm using, but as I mentioned earlier, I have no idea. I'm not one of those people who can just paint from a picture in their mind. I have to look at a picture and I can kind of copy it. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. Okay, so I have the basic colors that I want to use. And now what I'm going to do is try blending the colors together a bit more. And I do that, like I said, just by dipping the brush in the alcohol, keeping it clean, rubbing it off on my paper towel. And just blending the colors together. Now this is all new to me, so I'm just discovering what works for me. And I'm sure if you give this a try, you'll find what works best for you. And I have to be honest, I didn't even know I was capable of painting anything like this until I painted that bird, the first hummingbird. And I did that because of a challenge by Lola. And I was amazed that I could do it. So I've decided that instead of just doing flowers all the time, that I would try and grow as an artist and see what more I can do other than flowers. I won't stop doing the flowers, but I'm really enjoying discovering the ability to paint different things. I think that we should all try and grow as artists and not stick to just one thing because it's safe. Because to be honest, that's exactly what I did. And you might be missing out. So I'm just trying to soften these lines a little bit here. And layering my color. And what's great about this, doing things this way, is that you can tap into your colors, put it on here, and then blend them and let some of the alcohol evaporate also. So you can blend different colors together to get a color that you need that you may not have. And I'm learning a lot about using shadows, creating shadows, which I was never really good at before. But I think I'm getting a little bit better. I can't express how important it is to blot off your brush. Okay. Now, to create the highlights, what I did was I just left the area blank where my highlights are going to go. and then I have a bit of a highlight over here. So what I do is I clean my brush and make sure that I clean off the alcohol, dab it on my paper towel, and then I remove some of the ink in that area so that I get a good highlight. Also, I have my alcohol blending pen. Make sure that the tip is clean, and you can also remove the ink using that. And I'm keeping this painting fairly light. I'm not using a lot of dark colors. I like the way it looks light. Now, in order to blend that little part in a little bit, I'm going to just come in with a little bit more color. And if you go outside the lines that you drew, it's very easy to go back with the brush and clean up those edges so that you don't lose the shape. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm cleaning up my smudges. Kind of looks like an avocado. Okay, now let me work on this top here. I'm going to use a smaller brush for that. Here I'm just tapping to move that darker brown ink around a little bit, to break it up. And I think my next purchase will be some tiny brushes. So you can just tap and remove some of the ink if you don't like the way something turned out, or if you need to add highlights. Okay, now I'm going to do the stem, and I'm going to use, the stem I'm looking at is pretty dark, so I'm going to use a mixture of black and brown. I'm so nervous about having too much alcohol on my brush that I end up cleaning it all off. And have to go back constantly. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that stem. I think it's a little thick over here, so I'm going to try and remove some of this. That's what the great thing about alcohol inks is, that you can easily remove it. Whereas you can't do that with other paints, other mediums. Alright, so now pears have these little dots on them. And what I'm going to do to create those dots is I'm going to dip my brush. Let me show you. I'm going to dip my brush into I'm going to keep it kind of wet, and I'm going to mix a couple of colors here. I'm using yellow and orange, and I'm mixing them, but I want to keep it a little bit wet. And I have a little brown here. I'm going to add that in too. Not sure you can see this, but now I'm going to come in and do these dots that the pears have on them. But it's important to keep the brush a little bit wet, because you don't want them to be solid. You want them to be soft. I think my pear needs a little bit more shadow, and I see that there's a highlight right about this area here. Now I just want to soften that line. You know how you get that crusty edge? I'm going to soften that a little bit. And now on the darker side, I see that the dots are kind of greenish. And now I've too much alcohol on my brush. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more shadow or shading on this side here. try not to smudge this. What happens if you have too much alcohol on the brush, what you end up doing is removing instead of adding the paint. That's what I found. Here we go. I found my pear was a little lopsided, so I'm going to try and straighten that out a little bit. Also noticing that I did my dots all in a line, which I don't like. I think a little bit more shadow on this side. I'm just trying to give a little definition to the shape of my pear. I think that looks a little bit better. I'm going to try and bring a little bit more of that up into it. And then underneath, because there's a shadow, I see that this part is darker. So I'm using a mixture of the black and the brown. Okay, I think I like that. You can see I'm smudging all over the place because I got a lot of ink on my hand, but that's easily cleaned off. And now to create the shadow underneath, that always scares me because I'm so afraid of ruining the painting by adding a shadow. So what I did on the other painting was I used, not mushroom, slate, because in the picture that I'm painting from, that's what it resembles to me. And what I did was dipped my brush and I took off most of the alcohol from the brush and I dipped it into the slate, dabbing most of it off. And then I started with doing it lightly because you can always add more. And then I'll just go straight into the ink and do it a little darker around the fruit itself. And then I'll blend it out. I think I went a little too far over here, so I'm going to remove some of that. Even soften it up a little bit. And now I'm going to take a piece of clean paper towel and get some fresh alcohol on here. And I'm going to clean up where I smudged. And then what I like to do is, see how my alcohol is tinted now? I'm going to dip my brush into it, dip some of it off, and I'm going to use that as my background. It just adds a very soft tint to the paper, so it's not just white. It gives it almost like a tea stain. Just try not to get too close to your fruit. Oh, like I just did here. But again, because it's so light, it's just a little tinge. And I really like the way that looks. Okay, I'm going to call this finished. Turn it around and bring it up close for you. I don't know if this is the best way, but this is the way that I've been doing it and kind of works for me. So I hope that you give this a try. It's a lot of fun to see, to try and grow and find that you have the ability to do things that you didn't even know. All right, everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on my next video. Thanks for watching.